Hey friends, I've got a story that's so satisfying, it could be straight out of a movie. You know those moments in life when you feel like you've hit the jackpot of revenge? Well, this is one of those stories. Let me set the stage. My name is Martha. A few months back, my father passed away. It was a tough time for our family, but we pulled together to get through it. Dad had always been a great provider, and he left behind a sizable estate, including the family home, some investments, and a vintage car collection that would make any car enthusiast drool. Now, here's where things take a turn. My older brother, Mark, suddenly became a little too interested in Dad's assets. He'd always been the black sheep of the family, and I should have seen it coming. At the funeral, he couldn't stop talking about how he should get the lion's share because he had kids to support and bills to pay. Classic Mark. I knew something was up when he started getting chummy with Dad's lawyer, Mr. Stevens. They'd have hushed conversations at family gatherings, and it all seemed fishy. I couldn't prove anything, though, until the day of the will reading. The whole family gathered in the lawyer's office, and there was an air of tension you could cut with a knife. Mr. Stevens began to read the will, and as expected, Mark got the lion's share of the estate, including the family home. My heart sank as I thought he'd won. But then Mr. Stevens paused, looked over his glasses, and dropped the bombshell of the century. Dad's will stipulated that Mark would only get those assets if he agreed to one condition. He had to live in the family home for a year, without selling it or renting it out. If he failed to meet this condition, everything would be split equally among the rest of the family, me included. Mark's face turned a shade of crimson I didn't know existed. He spluttered, protested, and even tried to argue, but Mr. Stevens was firm. It was like something out of a legal drama. The rest of us couldn't believe our luck. So there you have it, friends. Mark's greed got the best of him, and now he's stuck in Dad's house, fuming while the rest of us get our fair share. I'm not one to revel in another's misfortune, but this time, karma delivered a dish that was too delicious to resist. Listen to my story to the end, and I'll spill the beans on how Mark's year in the family home is going. It's going to be a wild ride, and I can't wait to share it with you all. I couldn't help but smile as Mr. Stevens calmly closed the will, effectively sealing Mark's fate. It was poetic justice at its finest, and I savored the moment. Mark, on the other hand, was livid. His face turned an alarming shade of red, and he shot daggers at Mr. Stevens. "You can't be serious," Mark shouted, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "This is insane, and it's not what Dad would have wanted." Mr. Stevens, ever the composed lawyer, simply shrugged. "I'm just here to execute your father's wishes, Mark. He outlined this condition in his will, and we must respect it." My other siblings and I exchanged glances, trying to contain our excitement. We had always known Mark's true colors, but this was a whole new level of karma coming back to bite him. As the will reading continued, Mr. Stevens outlined the logistics of the condition. Mark had 30 days to move into the family home, and he couldn't sell it or rent it out for a year from the date of occupancy. If he violated these terms, the assets would be divided among the remaining siblings. Mark stormed out of the lawyer's office, vowing to fight this injustice in court. He even threatened to contest the will's validity. But deep down, we knew he was cornered. Dad had been meticulous in his planning, and Mr. Stevens assured us that the will was ironclad. Over the next few weeks, Mark reluctantly moved into the family home, bitterness oozing from every pore. We all helped with the transition, making sure he had no excuses to break the conditions. It was amusing to see him try to negotiate with us for leniency, but we held firm. This was Dad's final wish, and we intended to honor it. Mark's life in the family home was far from comfortable. He resented every moment spent there, surrounded by memories of our childhood and the life he so desperately wanted to escape. I couldn't help but relish in the sweet taste of revenge as I watched him grumble and complain. But there was one thing Mark didn't anticipate: the watchful eyes of the neighborhood. Our parents had lived in that house for decades, and the neighbors were like an extended family. They knew about Dad's will and the conditions he had set for Mark. It didn't take long for them to become Mark's unofficial surveillance team. Every time he tried to bring in a realtor or put the house on the market, someone would anonymously tip us off. Mark's frustration grew with each failed attempt. It was as if the universe was conspiring against him. As the days turned into weeks, Mark's resolve began to waver. He realized that he was trapped in a situation of his own making, and no amount of tantrums or threats could change that. The house, once a symbol of his potential windfall, had become a gilded cage. Next, I will tell you into the comical mishaps and neighborhood interventions that made Mark's year in the family home even more entertaining. Stay tuned, friends. Justice is being served one day at a time. As the weeks turned into months, Mark's predicament in the family home only grew more comical and bizarre, like a real-life sitcom unfolding before our eyes. It was a twisted form of poetic justice that I couldn't help but relish, given what he had put our family through. After all, he had unscrupulously seized our rightful inheritance, and now he was paying the price, quite literally, for his avarice and deceit. One of the most entertaining aspects of this entire ordeal was witnessing Mark's desperate attempts to maintain some semblance of his old life within the confines of the family home. You see, he had been a big shot in his upscale condo, living a life of opulence with a personal chef, a housekeeper, and a gardener to cater to his every whim. However, in the family home, he had to fend for himself, and the results were nothing short of comedic brilliance. I still vividly remember the time he tried to cook a meal for himself. It was an epic disaster of monumental proportions, a culinary catastrophe that would be legendary in family lore. Smoke billowed from the kitchen, and the shrill blaring of the fire alarm reverberated through the house as he desperately tried to salvage his burnt creation. We, the rightful heirs who had suffered his greed, rushed over, fearing for the safety of the house. Instead, we found Mark, frantically waving a dish towel in front of the alarm, his face smudged with soot, and his once impeccable chef's apron now a grimy, scorched rag. "You guys never had to deal with this," he yelled, pointing accusatory fingers at us, as if we were to blame for his culinary calamity. "I can't believe Dad's doing this to me." We couldn't help but chuckle at his culinary misadventure. It was a stark reminder that Mark was completely out of his element in the family home. His lavish lifestyle, which he had flaunted so shamelessly, had left him ill-prepared for the simple realities of everyday living that the rest of us had long since mastered. But the most satisfying moments of all were when the neighborhood, our silent allies, came to our aid. They had taken it upon themselves to enforce Dad's unorthodox conditions, ensuring that Mark didn't dare to try and circumvent them. If he so much as contemplated putting the house on the market, the local real estate agents would be discreetly informed about the will's ironclad stipulations. Once, Mark attempted to rent out a room in the house, perhaps thinking it would bring in some much-needed income. However, little did he know that one of the vigilant neighbors had assumed the role of a potential tenant, engaging in a charade that almost felt like an episode of a hidden camera prank show. At the very last moment, just as Mark was ready to seal the deal, the neighbor revealed the truth, leaving Mark flustered and fuming. His frustration knew no bounds, and we reveled in his exasperation. As the months dragged on, Mark's relationship with the neighborhood soured further. He had unwittingly become the pariah of the community, and people avoided him like the plague. His desperate attempts to garner sympathy from the very people he had once ignored or treated with disdain were met with icy indifference. It was poetic justice at its finest, a symphony of retribution conducted by the universe itself. Mark had grievously underestimated the power of unity within a close-knit neighborhood, and it had become his undoing. The collective strength of the community was a force to be reckoned with, and Mark was discovering this firsthand. But there was still one final twist in this tale of revenge, a revelation that left us all dumbfounded. Next, I will tell you how Mark's tumultuous year in the family home took an unexpected turn, shaking the very foundations of our family's legacy. Stay with me, friends, because this story is about to get even juicier. As the seasons changed and a year passed since Dad's funeral, the drama surrounding Mark's residency in the family home took an unexpected turn. It was as if fate had decided to add one final twist to this bizarre tale of revenge, and it left us all in a state of bewilderment. You see, despite the absurd conditions laid out in Dad's will, Mark had managed to hold on to the family home for an entire year. He had endured the comedic mishaps, the neighborhood's vigilant surveillance, and the utter isolation he had brought upon himself. But he was unyielding in his determination to cling to the house, convinced that he would outlast the stipulations of the will. However, Mark had overlooked a crucial detail, one that would prove to be his downfall. The family home was an aging structure, and its maintenance required not only financial resources, but also a deep understanding of its quirks and idiosyncrasies. Mark possessed neither. At first, we noticed minor issues: a leaky roof, a malfunctioning furnace, and creaking floorboards. Mark, in his arrogance, believed he could simply hire contractors to address these problems. But what he failed to realize was that the house had a peculiar temperament, and it seemed to rebel against his presence. The leaky roof became an incessant drip, defying all attempts at repair. The furnace emitted eerie, discordant noises that kept Mark awake at night, and the creaking floorboards seemed to whisper haunting secrets. It was as if the house itself had joined the neighborhood in its silent revolt against its unwelcome occupant. Mark's frustration grew day by day. He hired a slew of contractors, each more bewildered than the last by the house's bizarre behavior. Plumbers scratched their heads as pipes seemed to change course at will. Electricians were confounded by switches that operated in reverse, and carpenters found themselves entangled in a maze of hidden passages behind walls. His financial resources began to dwindle as he poured money into futile attempts to tame the rebellious house. The neighborhood, well aware of his predicament, watched with a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. It was as if the house itself had become an active participant in our quest for revenge. Mark's sleepless nights and growing desperation were a source of dark amusement for us. He would often emerge from the house in disheveled attire, hair askew, and eyes bloodshot from lack of rest. His once confident demeanor had crumbled, replaced by a haunted look that mirrored the house's own peculiar personality. But it was during a stormy night that the house unleashed its most spectacular display of defiance. As thunder rumbled and rain lashed against the windows, Mark was jolted awake by a cacophony of crashing and banging. He stumbled through the darkened corridors, his flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. What he discovered was a scene straight out of a horror movie. Furniture levitated, seemingly of its own volition, and household objects danced through the air. The walls vibrated with an otherworldly energy, and the very foundation of the house trembled. It was as if the house had awakened its dormant spirits to expel the intruder. Mark fled the house in terror, leaving behind his belongings and his illusions of conquest. As he stood in the pouring rain, drenched and defeated, the neighborhood watched in eerie silence. The house had made its final verdict, and Mark had been judged unworthy. In the aftermath of this supernatural spectacle, Mark decided he had had enough. He relinquished his claim to the family home, realizing that some forces were beyond human comprehension. The house, it seemed, had exacted its revenge in the most enigmatic and poetic manner. And so, friends, our family home returned to us, no longer tainted by Mark's presence. The neighborhood, our steadfast allies, rejoiced in silence, knowing that justice had been served. Mark, once a symbol of greed and betrayal, faded into obscurity. But the tale doesn't end here. Next, I'll share the ultimate twist in this saga, an unexpected discovery that shed light on Dad's true intentions and left us with a newfound appreciation for the eccentricities of our family home. Stay tuned for the grand finale. As the dust settled on Mark's hasty departure from our family home, we thought the tale had reached its conclusion. The house, having successfully defended itself against the invader, returned to its serene, if slightly quirky, state. The neighborhood, once rife with intrigue and espionage, resumed its usual rhythms, and life appeared to return to normal. But as fate would have it, the final act of this peculiar drama was still waiting in the wings. It was a revelation that would not only astonish us, but also provide closure to the enigmatic legacy our father had left behind. In the days following Mark's departure, I began the arduous task of sorting through the accumulated detritus he had left behind. It was a Herculean effort, as he had seemingly abandoned most of his possessions in his panicked flight from the house. Among the discarded items, I stumbled upon an old leather-bound journal, weathered by time and neglect. Curiosity piqued, I opened the journal to find the handwritten entries of our father, dating back several decades. It was a chronicle of his thoughts, dreams, and aspirations, a glimpse into the mind of a man who had always been somewhat of an enigma to us. As I read through the pages, a pattern began to emerge. Our father's writing spoke of his love for the family home, his fascination with its idiosyncrasies, and his deep connection to the neighborhood. It was clear that the house held a special place in his heart, and he had dedicated years to understanding its mysteries. But the most astonishing revelation came when I reached the final entries of the journal. In those pages, our father had detailed a plan that would ultimately lead to Mark's downfall and the house's triumphant defense. He had orchestrated the entire series of events, from the eccentric will to the house's rebellious antics. It was all part of his grand scheme to ensure that the family home remained untouched by those who did not truly appreciate its quirks. In his own words, he had written, "Only those who understand the heart of this house deserve to inherit it. I will test them as the house has tested me." It was a revelation that left me both astounded and moved. Our father had devised this elaborate ruse, not out of malice, but out of love for the house he had called home for so many years. He had used his eccentricity and flair for the dramatic to protect the place he held dear. And so, friends, the story comes to a close with a newfound appreciation for our father's legacy. The house, once a symbol of revenge, now stood as a testament to his love and ingenuity. Mark's brief tenure had inadvertently become a test of character, and he had failed spectacularly. As for us, we continued to live in the house, embracing its quirks and mysteries with open hearts. It was a daily reminder of our father's eccentricity and his deep affection for the place he had called home. The neighborhood, once divided by suspicion, had come together in a shared understanding of the house's unique magic. In the end, it was a tale of revenge turned redemption, of a house that defended itself, and of a father's enduring love. And as I write these final words, I can't help but smile, knowing that our family home will continue to enchant and confound generations to come. Thank you for joining me on this extraordinary journey, friends. And remember, sometimes the most unusual stories hold the deepest truths.
Hey there, friends. Strap in, 'cause I've got a tale that'll make your jaw drop. We've all been through those moments when our gut tells us something's off and curiosity gets the best of us. Well, this is one of those stories, but trust me, it's a roller coaster of emotions. So, there's me, living a seemingly happy life with my hubby, Daniel. We had been married for 5 years, and everything felt peachy until it didn't. You see, Daniel had been working a high-stress job at some fancy corporate office. He'd often come home late, worn out, and claimed it was the workload. I thought it was the classic workaholic spiel, and I was understanding. I mean, love and support, right? One evening, though, something changed. I was looking for my lost phone, and what do I find? A stack of letters tucked away in the back of his desk drawer, each addressed to him from a mysterious sender with no return address. They looked old, and their edges were frayed, as if someone had read them over and over again. Naturally, I started wondering, who is this secret pen pal of my husband's? Why are these letters hidden away? And the biggest question of all, why hadn't he mentioned them to me? I couldn't resist the urge to open one of the letters. Call me nosy, but these secrets were gnawing at my sanity. So I delicately slid a letter from its envelope and began to read, my heart pounding. The letter was from a woman named Lily, and she poured her heart out about missing Daniel terribly. She mentioned memories they had shared, moments of passion, and their dreams of a future together. It was a love letter, no doubt. But wait, it got worse. Lily signed off as "Your forever love." My stomach did somersaults. Your forever love? What kind of melodramatic nonsense was this? And why did it sound so personal? I thought of Daniel, who was in the next room, probably wrapping up another late night at the office. My mind raced with questions, and as I read more letters, the reality began to sink in. What the heck was my husband hiding? And how long had he been hiding it? It was time to put on my detective hat and get to the bottom of this mess. All right, folks, thanks for sticking around. When we last left off, I had discovered those mysterious letters tucked away in Daniel's desk. Now, I'm about to dive deeper into this web of secrets and lies. Buckle up. The letters from Lily shook me to my core, but I needed more concrete evidence. So, what's a determined wife to do? Well, I knew I had to confront Daniel, but I had to be smart about it. After all, this was a man who'd managed to hide these letters for who knows how long. The next day, I decided to drop a little hint. I casually mentioned to him that I had found some old love letters from an ex-boyfriend while cleaning the attic. I watched his reaction like a hawk, but all I got was an awkward chuckle and a dismissive, "Oh, really? You should throw them away." It wasn't the reaction I had hoped for, but it was something. I knew I needed to dig deeper. So I embarked on my little mission, which included late-night snooping, phone checking, I know, but desperate times, and even following him a couple of times. One evening, he said he had to go to the office for an emergency. Red flags waving, right? So guess what? I decided to tail him, just like in those cheesy spy movies. I parked my car a few blocks away from his office building and watched as he entered the seemingly empty office. My heart pounding, I waited for a while, then stealthily made my way to the building. I used my best ninja moves to sneak in, and lo and behold, I heard hushed voices coming from his office. Sneaking closer, I peeked through the frosted glass window and saw him, Daniel, talking to a woman, the mysterious Lily herself. My heart felt like it was going to leap out of my chest. They were too engrossed in their conversation to notice me. I couldn't hear everything, but their body language said it all. It was intimate, and my blood boiled. I snapped a quick picture with my phone as evidence, my hands trembling like crazy. I had proof now, but I needed to play this smart. I slinked away from the scene, my mind racing. Revenge was coming, but it had to be perfect. I spent the next few days gathering more information, and what I uncovered was mind-boggling. It seemed like Daniel and Lily had been involved for years, even before we got married. My world shattered as I realized the extent of his betrayal. But here's the twist, friends. I wasn't about to let this betrayal break me. Nope, I had a plan, and it was deliciously wicked. Okay, the plot was thickening, and it was time for yours, truly, to unleash Operation Sabotage. Revenge was a dish best served cold, right? First, I needed to gather more information about Lily, the mysterious woman who had been tearing my world apart. I did some online sleuthing. Thank you, Internet, and found out she worked at a nearby marketing agency. Armed with this knowledge, I made a cunning plan. I dressed up like a corporate spy, complete with oversized sunglasses and a trench coat. Yes, I went full-on undercover mode. I strolled into her office building and did my best impression of a lost tourist, asking the receptionist for directions to her office. With her help, I made it to Lily's floor, where her colleagues thought I was some new big-shot client. I finally spotted her office, discreetly checked her nameplate, and snapped a quick picture. Score. I had her full name now, Lily Walker. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I retreated from the scene, feeling like James Bond's long-lost cousin. Next stop, social media. I stalked her profiles like it was my job, and guess what I found? Her upcoming high school reunion. I concocted a brilliant plan. I created a fake Facebook profile, pretending to be a fellow high school alumnus, and requested to join the reunion group. I spent hours crafting my backstory and building my character. I even photoshopped a vintage yearbook photo to match the others. Nailed it. Once inside the group, I started planting seeds of doubt. I posted cryptic messages about how some people never change and dropped hints about secrets from the past. The buzz started growing, and people began whispering about old scandals. But I wasn't done yet. I messaged Lily privately, pretending to be a concerned classmate who had heard rumors about her affair with a married man. Oh boy, she took the bait. She replied, all flustered and defensive, denying everything. But her reaction told me everything I needed to know. I knew I had her right where I wanted her, panicked and paranoid. My plan was working like a charm, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. But revenge is a dish best served with a side of patience, my friends. I was just getting started. So, Lily was starting to feel the heat. She was on edge, constantly glancing over her shoulder at the reunion, wondering who was stirring the pot. Her perfect little world was unraveling, and I was here for every delicious moment. The reunion was just around the corner, and I knew I had to turn up the heat. I reached out to some of my real high school friends and filled them in on my plan. They were all too eager to help bring Lily down a notch, considering what she'd done to me. We decided to create a fake, scandalous story about Lily and an anonymous, well-known figure, adding just enough details to make it believable. We crafted a narrative that would send shockwaves through the reunion. Lily was about to become the talk of the town. I posed as an anonymous tipster and sent this juicy piece of gossip to a local gossip blog. You know the type, always hungry for the next big scoop. The story spread like wildfire, and before long, everyone in our hometown was buzzing about it. The reunion arrived, and the tension was palpable. People were whispering, exchanging knowing glances, and Lily was clearly rattled. She tried to put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks in her composure. Revenge had never tasted so sweet. As the night wore on, the fake story continued to circulate. People approached Lily, asking her about the scandalous affair. She vehemently denied it, of course, but doubt had already taken root in people's minds. Her reputation was in shambles, and I couldn't help but relish in her misery. But I wasn't finished. I had one more ace up my sleeve. I knew Lily's weakness, her vanity. She prided herself on her appearance and reputation, and I was about to exploit that. I arranged for a friend to accidentally spill a glass of red wine on her pristine white dress. The gasps and whispers that followed were music to my ears. Lily was mortified, her face a mask of humiliation. With my plan in full swing, I retreated from the chaos I'd created, satisfied that my revenge was hitting its mark. But there was still more to come, dear friends. As the reunion unfolded, the tension was electric. Lily was caught in a web of deceit, and I was the puppeteer pulling the strings. But there was one finale act left to stage. I watched from the shadows as Lily struggled to salvage her reputation. The scandalous affair story had spread like wildfire, and no amount of denial could extinguish the flames. She was cornered, desperate, and on the verge of unraveling completely. Then came my pièce de résistance. I had convinced my friend, Sarah, to approach Lily with a proposition, an opportunity to clear her name. Sarah posed as a well-connected figure in town, offering to help Lily expose the anonymous tipster behind the scandal. It was an offer too tempting for Lily to resist. The plan was simple, yet brilliant. We would lure Lily into a trap of her own making. Sarah promised to meet Lily in a secluded part of the reunion venue, away from prying eyes. Lily, desperate for redemption, took the bait. As they met in the dimly lit corner, I watched from a distance, my heart pounding with anticipation. Sarah, with a sly grin, told Lily that she had uncovered the identity of the tipster. Lily leaned in, eager to hear the name, her face a mixture of hope and dread. And then the bombshell dropped. "It's Karen," Sarah said with a wicked smile. "Your little sister." Lily's eyes widened in shock, and she stumbled back as if struck by lightning. Her world came crashing down around her, and she realized the depths of her own downfall. She had been played like a fiddle, and I reveled in the sweet taste of victory. But that wasn't the end of it. As Lily tried to process the revelation, I stepped out of the shadows, finally revealing myself. The look on her face was a priceless blend of horror and realization. "You!" she stammered, her voice trembling. "It was you all along?" I nodded, relishing the moment. "Surprised, Lily? You underestimated me, just like you always did. But it's time you faced the consequences of your actions." The reunion attendees, drawn by the commotion, gathered around, witnessing the unmasking of the devious mastermind behind the scandal. Lily's humiliation was complete. As the truth sunk in, Lily was left humbled and defeated. Her carefully constructed world had crumbled, and there was no escaping the consequences of her deceit. Revenge had been served, and it was a dish best served cold. So, dear friends, that's the climax of my story, the moment when Lily's reign of terror came crashing down, but there's still an epilogue left to tell. After the dramatic unmasking at our high school reunion, I watched Lily's life spiral into chaos. The fallout was intense, to say the least. Friends distanced themselves from her, and her reputation lay in tatters. Her affair with my ex-husband was now public knowledge, and the scandal became the talk of the town. But this wasn't just about exposing her secrets. It was about teaching her a lesson. Lily had underestimated me for far too long, and it was time she learned that her actions had consequences. Lily's marriage to my ex, Daniel, crumbled under the weight of the affair. He couldn't bear the shame and guilt, and their relationship imploded. He moved out of town, leaving Lily alone to deal with the wreckage of her life. Meanwhile, I had found unexpected solace in my newfound friendships at the reunion. People who had once been mere acquaintances became my confidants. We laughed together, reminisced about old times, and bonded over shared experiences. I realized that I wasn't alone in this journey. I had a support system that cared about me. As for Daniel, well, he had learned a harsh lesson about the consequences of his actions. His relationship with Lily had fallen apart, and he was left to pick up the pieces of his own life. He tried to reach out to me, but I had no interest in rekindling our past. My focus was on healing and moving forward. In the midst of all this chaos, I received an unexpected message from an unlikely source. My sister, Susan. She had witnessed the unraveling of Lily's life and reached out to me, seeking forgiveness and reconciliation. She had seen the error of her ways and wanted to make amends. Susan, always the more emotionally expressive of the two, rebelled against the injustice of it all. She channeled her grief and anger into defiance, often pushing boundaries and challenging authority figures. I, on the other hand, internalized my pain, choosing to retreat into the comforting embrace of solitude and silence. Our coping mechanisms diverged, and the gap between us grew wider. As we entered our teenage years, our paths seemed to diverge even further. Susan's rebellious streak intensified, leading to strained relationships with our grandparents. She started dyeing her hair vibrant shades, hanging out with what our grandparents deemed the wrong crowd, and engaging in minor delinquencies that left them exasperated. I, however, took the opposite route, seeking solace in academics and extracurricular activities. I aimed for excellence in everything I pursued, driven by the desire to make our parents proud, even if they could no longer witness my achievements. The strain between us peaked when Susan dropped out of high school, a decision that caused a rift between her and our grandparents. While she asserted her newfound independence, I continued to pursue my studies diligently, determined to secure a brighter future for myself. When Susan left home, the divide between us felt insurmountable. We became estranged, communicating only through sporadic and terse messages. Our family bonds weakened, and it seemed like Susan had embarked on a path of self-destruction while I sought stability and fulfillment. Part of me was wary, remembering the years of hurt she had caused, but another part saw the opportunity for healing and redemption. We met cautiously, and Susan poured out her remorse and regret. It was a heartfelt conversation. one that allowed us to bridge the chasm that had separated us for so long. I learned that Susan had faced her own share of struggles and hardships in the wake of our estrangement. She had hit rock bottom, but it had been the catalyst for her transformation. She had turned her life around, found stability, and wanted a chance to rebuild our sisterly bond. It wasn't an easy decision, but I chose to forgive her. I realized that holding on to anger and resentment wouldn't bring me peace. Instead, I embraced the opportunity to mend our relationship, and it was a choice that brought unexpected joy. So, friends, that's where we stand today. Lily's empire had crumbled, Daniel had faced his reckoning, and my sister and I had embarked on a journey of reconciliation. Revenge had led to redemption, and I had found strength in forgiveness. In the aftermath of the high school reunion and the chaos that ensued, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led me here. My quest for revenge had uncovered secrets, shattered illusions, and exposed the true nature of those around me. But more importantly, it had transformed me. I had always been the quiet, reserved one, the peacemaker, if you will. But life had a way of teaching me that sometimes you need to fight for yourself, to stand up against those who seek to hurt you. My journey had been a crash course in resilience and self-discovery. Lily, once the queen bee of our high school, had lost her crown and found herself isolated. She faced the consequences of her actions and the judgment of those she had wronged. It was a humbling experience for her, and while I didn't revel in her suffering, I couldn't deny that a sense of justice had been served. As for Daniel, he had learned that taking shortcuts and betraying trust would only lead to his downfall. His reckless pursuit of his desires had cost him dearly, and he was left to rebuild his life from the ruins of his mistakes. My sister Susan's transformation was perhaps the most unexpected turn of events. Her journey from a troubled past to seeking redemption had touched my heart. We had rebuilt our sisterly bond, and while it wasn't without its challenges, forgiveness had allowed us to heal and move forward together. I also found solace in the friends I had reconnected with at the reunion. They had been my pillars of support during these tumultuous times, and I was grateful for their presence in my life. We shared laughter, tears, and stories of our shared past, reminding me that I was never truly alone. So, what did I learn from this whirlwind of events? Revenge may have been my initial motivation, but it had ultimately led me to a different destination, one of self-discovery and growth. I had rediscovered my strength and resilience, and I had learned the power of forgiveness and redemption. Life had a way of teaching us lessons, often in unexpected ways. It had shown me that we all make mistakes, but it's how we choose to respond and grow from them that defines us. Revenge may have been a fleeting desire, but redemption and forgiveness were the true keys to finding peace and happiness. As I stand here today, surrounded by the love of those who truly care about me, I can't help but feel grateful for this incredible journey. The scars of the past have healed, and I look forward to what the future holds. Thank you, friends, for joining me on this roller coaster of a story. It's been an honor sharing this tale with you. Remember, life's challenges may test us, but our choices and resilience can lead us to unexpected places. Embrace the journey, and may your path be one of redemption and happiness.